Hi everyone! How are you doing? Here in Europe, where I'm from, the weather is like it is in Egypt. In big cities, it's unthinkable for some people to go outside. Temperatures in the sun here are over 40 degrees Celsius. That's more than 104 degrees Fahrenheit. People from Central Europe in particular aren't used to this kind of heat. Then severe storms roll in, and many people fear tornadoes and heavy hailstorms. What's going on? I'm sure you've heard about the major earthquake in Venezuela. When I saw the videos from the disaster site, I couldn't help but cry. And it's not just Venezuela. Disasters happen every day in many places around the world. But let's turn our attention to Egypt and take a look at some frescoes and some similarities with other symbols. Hopefully, my laptop and my fan can handle the intense heat. In the last video, we explained how a light bulb works. It's not actually a function, but rather a symbol of the man kneeling here beneath a human fetus growing from the flower of life, the lotus. The lotus is attached to the figure's heel. It is most likely a personification of the biblical serpent, or a dragon. The womb is supported by the penis. And the role of the woman. Here, a woman kneeling beneath the same human fetus, but the lotus flower is connected to the pedestal on which the woman kneels, with the sun above her head. It is a symbol of our earth set within a square pool. The large figure on the left is likely a personification of the sun, the biblical Adam. This relief shows a diagram of how it all fits together. In other words, how we come into this world. A woman and a man are kneeling beneath a human fetus shaped like a snake. Then there is another woman kneeling in front of the penis of the man who is directly supporting the snake, which is likely a symbol of conception. The sun, the dragon, and the earth are working together. The woman and the man are also working together, though they may be unaware of this fact. But the dragon, the biblical serpent, is somehow an extra element here, and that is the essence of what is known as the biblical sin, and its consequences have been with us from the very moment of conception. The figure on the right is a hybrid with a human body, a monkey's tail, and a fish's head. It is holding two knives, and as I mentioned last time, this could be the result of human DNA manipulation. And let's take a look at something that appears in Egyptian frescoes. The problem with the Egyptian script, that is, hieroglyphs, is this. There are many terms and symbols for one and the same thing, and in the Egyptian interpretation, the human soul is represented by the largest number of characters. In hieroglyphs, the soul is depicted in the form of various animals. Sometimes it is shown as a triangle with a line inside, sometimes simply as a circle, but very often it is depicted as a bird. This is a large number of representations for a single concept, and unfortunately, it leads to these symbols, which express a single thing, being used for multiple meanings and translated to refer to multiple concepts. In Hermeticism, the soul is formless, but it can also take on the forms of various creatures and even seemingly solid objects. Does that seem impossible to you? Well, in the spiritual world and higher dimensions, as we are accustomed to saying, there is most likely something we are only just discovering, and that is quantum physics. Solid matter has no place there, and even less so do beings of flesh and bone. That is a privilege unique to our Earth. Hermeticism states that the human soul is formless and is a form of light. However, there are the concepts of spirit and soul. I believe, and there are certain indications that support this assertion of mine, that the human soul is actually a radiant orb that continually incarnates into a physical body. In other words, the human spirit is a fully formed human being who has undergone some form of transformation. And this human spirit possesses incredible abilities. I would even go so far as to say that it has the ability of projection and, in such cases, our eyes see only the result, but not its source. Is it too complicated? I just wanted to say that nothing solid can survive in the so-called universe, and anything that was created on Earth with serpent DNA and has a solid skeleton most likely does not exist anywhere else in the universe. Or am I wrong? Sure, there are these gray beings who live in tunnels deep underground, but they, too, have solid bodies and bones. Where did they come from? I have a sense of the suffering these beings have endured, and will come back to them later. However, the biblical sin took place on earth, and we are, unfortunately, part of it. But everything has a purpose, and so even the biblical story involving the serpent is not without meaning. Human DNA is depicted in Egyptian frescoes, and not only in Egypt. So far, you've been looking at photographs, and now we'll return to some of those images. I'm sure most of you have paused to consider this symbol and, like me, think it might represent DNA. It's interesting that this shape appears quite often in frescoes and may even have served as a model for Greek, Roman, and medieval decorative art. One such pattern can be found, for example, in the temple complex at Lalibela in Ethiopia. But we must not forget that there are two forms of DNA in the human body. The second is mitochondrial DNA, which we inherit only from our mother and which is closed. This means that it forms a circle and carries its own genetic information. So what gift did we receive from the woman with the sun above her head? I believe this may refer to the ability of a human being to transform into an angelic being and free themselves from the cycle of endless reincarnation. However, there is still one crucial step remaining before this can happen. By the way, take a look at corporate, military, and pharmaceutical logos. You'll find many depictions of a winged earth among them. Also note the circular elements in the decoration. These may represent human orbs, that is, human souls, that are constantly reincarnating. Many of them carry small crosses, crosses of life. Let's go back to the cartouche and take a look at this part. This is, once again, the upper part of the cross of life, which we can also see here. And there's something else here. A small circle with a cross in the center, a symbol of the human radiant orb, that is, the human soul. You may feel that I'm repeating myself and that I'm always talking about the same thing. But Egyptian hieroglyphs don't tell the story of the famous pharaonic dynasties. They are a library of human civilization. Take a look at this statue, for example. It's interesting in every way. On the left, we see the goddess Isis, that is, Mother Earth in the Bible, depicted as a woman with the sun above her head. She is holding a lotus flower, a symbol of a human fetus 2 weeks old. On the right is a figure with a damaged face, but judging by the ears, it is likely Anubis, holding a staff shaped like a goat's head. Anubis is a figure of the underworld, and the underworld is understood to be our reality. It is the reality of death, in which human souls are constantly reincarnating into physical bodies. To help you understand this clearly, the Bible also states that we are living in a state of death, and we can therefore assume that true life begins after the death of the body, and that, in the final stage, human souls become angels, true human beings, just as they were created in the very beginning. I know this is hard for some people to understand. Mainstream science denies this fact. But ask yourselves, everything in this world has a purpose and an order. Why would something be created only to disappear over time? And the energy that drives this world doesn't disappear. It simply changes form. But let's take a look at a curious detail on the stele where the two figures are standing. Can you see that over there? First of all, here we have a symbol for the soul, a circle with a cross inside. But what do those two forks mean? They appear to be tied in some way. In many frescoes, similar forks appear untied and turned vertically. Many of you are familiar with this ingenious machine from your great-grandmother's old attic. It is a spinning wheel, and thread was spun on it. The upper part, called the spindle, closely resembles a fork depicted in an Egyptian fresco. I'm sure you all know what the function of DNA is. The main function of human DNA is to store and pass on genetic information. It acts as a cellular blueprint that determines the development, survival, and functioning of the entire organism. To sum it up, our DNA determines what our physical body should look like and how it should function. This divine energy, the soul in the form of a radiant orb invisible to the naked eye, then enters this vessel, our true self. This symbol thus represents the intertwining of the mother's DNA and the father's DNA and the formation of a new body, into which, however, the soul enters bearing the cross of life from the mother. This is information about the transmission of mitochondrial DNA with its own closed circular DNA, and at the same time, our physical body becomes our next, vehicle. Oh my! But it is completely unnatural for a human being. And we're back to the cartouche. There are other symbols here. From the left, we see the Ankh, or cross of life, a symbol representing a woman. Next to it, it appears to be a lotus flower with a stem, and something is protruding from the top of it. Further to the right are two seated figures, the one on the right being a woman with the sun above her head. This time, her spiritual form is that of a bird. In the center at the top is an eye, which may represent the sun. Many people assume that this is the pineal gland, but it is actually the same eye as the all-seeing eye above the pyramid. The symbol likely originates from the myths of Isis and Osiris, in which Osiris lost one eye in battle. The other eye belongs to Isis. We do not see her eye above the pyramid because Isis became Mother Earth. Here on the left, we see the spirit of Osiris, Adam or the sun held by a serpent. That is one eye. On the right is the spirit of Isis, Eve and Earth, with the sun above her head. That is the other eye. The symbol of the wavy line appears very often and apparently represents water. Water is the most important element of life because, as the Bible and the ancient Greek philosophers write, our entire world was created from water. But there is one more strange symbol that also appears quite often, and whose meaning I have, unfortunately, not yet been able to figure out. It looks like a strangely curved stick, and we can see it, for example, in Tutankhamun's tomb. Here they are. One of them is being held by a personified jaguar. It is a woman. She appears to be doing something with it toward the figure in white. The second object rests on a small table or pedestal, and a doe's hoof is also placed there. This is another symbol of Mother Earth as a woman and of the women born of her. You may already know why women wear a doe's mask on their heads at some Masonic ceremonies. However, that still does not explain the purpose of this object. A doe's hoof on the table and, later, a lamb on the grid. Both symbols convey the same meaning. And here we see the same objects again, and we can see that they serve a specific purpose. This depiction is very interesting because the figure in the center is clearly mummified. It is a woman, as indicated by the lotus flower on her head. In the Gospel of Matthew, we read the accounts of Mark and Luke that Joseph of Arimathea wrapped Jesus' body in strips of linen and laid it in a new tomb. The Gospel of John states that after the resurrection, he used strips of linen. The Gospel of John also states that Simon and Peter followed him directly into the tomb and saw there strips of linen, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. That's some very interesting information, isn't it? However, we must understand resurrection from the dead as the state in which the soul leaves the body. I am almost certain that what we are looking at here is the mummy of Tutankhamun, because Tutankhamun is definitely not a man. The name Tutankhamun contains the words Ankh and Amun, so the key to life, woman, and the sun, man. And since there are two keys, solar and lunar, it could be the second key of the sun god Ra, that is, Isis, or perhaps Nefertiti. The woman had many names, and her presence is intertwined throughout the history of Egypt. Is this a large number of reincarnations? I'm sure that's true, and as you know, Jesus promised that he would always be with people. But as I've already explained, Jesus isn't a name either. It's a term for a higher form of human existence. But let's take a look at a few more symbols. Take this relief, for example. There are two cartouches shaped like the upper part of the cross of life. At the top, we see birds as one of the forms of the spirit, and bulls as a symbol of life energy. But take a look at this cartouche. That looks like the head of Anubis, the god of the underworld and death. And here we have the object we saw a moment ago. It seems that this object sends souls to death, that is, to life in a physical body. What do you think? Below the cartouches, we'll be interested in this triangle. The Bible describes it as a horn, and I'm sure it's another symbol of the spirit. It appears everywhere in Egyptian frescoes. The Bible speaks of 3 seven-headed beasts. One of them is a dragon, and the other is a lion. The third seven-headed beast is the jaguar. Each of the 7 heads represents a spirit, that is, a human being, but in a different form of life than that of most people on this earth. The jaguar has 10 heads of the Kabbalah. It is a whisperer and tempts human beings to do evil. Are you enjoying this explanation of Egyptian hieroglyphs? To wrap up today's video, we'll take a look at 2 points of interest, the first of which is the Statue of Liberty. The whole world knows it, but very few people understand its significance. The Statue of Liberty depicts a woman holding an eternal flame. The eternal flame is like an eternal spark of light that people pass down from generation to generation, a spark of life. It has 7 horns on its head, representing the 7 spirits and the 7 churches. In her left hand, she is holding a book dated July 4th, 1776, which is the date the United States declared its independence. In reality, she should be holding a Bible, but here it has been adapted to American circumstances. By the way, Did you know that this statue was originally offered to Muslim countries and was supposed to have Semitic features? However, Muslims rejected such a statue, and today it stands as it is. The entire statue stands on a pedestal. It actually represents the earth. Only the wings have been omitted. The pedestal symbolizes a square pool in which our earth is set like a biblical mountain. Eve, Isis, Ishtar, Shiva. Its origins actually go back a long way. It can be found in ancient Greece and Rome. Even the Colossus of Rhodes is its male counterpart. Its identity has been kept secret for millennia. What about the pyramid? Does a square in the letter pi mean anything to you? So take a look at this Sumerian tablet. A pyramid with a biblical mountain inside, winged at the top, and with the sun at its peak. It is crucified on a double cross. We are so very small in this world that we have no chance of fathom all its mysteries. The scale is literally biblical. In the next video, we'll take a look at more hieroglyphs, symbols, and mysteries of tombs KV63 and KV62. We'll wrap up our series with a look at the development of the human fetus and the true form of an angelic being, so there are still plenty of surprises in store. Enjoy the sunshine, and take care until then.